Yeah, hide your kids, hide your wife. Got our own official cyber felon here. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, illwill, talking on finding MOBMAN. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll start off with a little slide here of who I am. Security consultant, red teamer, penetration tester, also as Roman said, cyber felon. Been kind of in this industry off and on for the past 20 plus years, professionally in the past like decade or so. That was great. But basically this whole talk is about how I got started into InfoSec and what kind of guided me along the way. So we're going to be talking about the origins and evolution of Subseven. Subseven was basically a Trojan that came out. First one initially came out in 99, working on it in 98, released it around like February of 99. It was basically a backdoor Trojan, a rat, which was a remote access tool. Basically, it wasn't the first of its kind, but it was one of the originals that kind of got people into cybersecurity pretty much. One of the podcasts I was listening to was like one of the programs that launched 1,000 InfoSec careers. Basically, the basis of this tool, a lot of knowledge that people gained of how computers work pretty much and push it towards security. Subseven, its name itself, basically from another Trojan that was out at the time called NetBus. Basically, the author had switched NetBus, reversed it, and basically came up with sub 10, and then added a 7 instead of a 10. And that's basically how he named it at the time. Originally, the first couple of versions, they were for Windows 95, 98. Probably up until the last few releases, it didn't work on NT-based computers. So Windows 2000 was one of the first that people were actually using, then over to XP when XP rolled out. So he eventually moved up and got that working on NT machines. A lot of it was like a hard-coded issue. He had like the RAS passwords. Basically, when you used to use dial-up, all that stuff would be stored on the computer, and he had it hard-coded on there to pull those RAS passwords up. If it didn't find them, it would crash. So essentially, the program itself started off as just a simple GUI with a bunch of buttons on it that you can do all types of stuff connecting to the server pretty much. Basically, there's a few different components of it. And basically, you start off with a server. It's something that you would send to the victim. You would have the client and you would have the edit server. The edit server would edit the server to your likings, basically any notifications that you got, any information about the victim, and all the stuff that you wanted to do. So you would edit the server, send it to them. Once they clicked on it, it would basically give you a notification that, hey, you can get on this computer. This was back in dial-up. Not a lot of people had firewalls. Not a lot of people had antivirus. Not a lot of people knew what the hell to do on their computers. So it was very simple to trick a lot of people. A lot of people got into social engineering, getting this on a person's computer. They would send them a file, call it like mypictures.exe or mypictures.com, any type of file type that was executable at the time. And then he basically started pulling in different stuff from different backdoors, starting up the GUI, getting the GUI better, having more features, adding more stuff on there. And eventually it rolled out to its final version before he stopped coding it, which was 2.2, which a lot of people didn't hate. It actually worked a lot better than the original versions, but people were too confused on how most of the stuff worked because it was using a lot of plugins. It had a lot of new features. So eventually he just got frustrated and went from 2.2 back to 2.15. He basically fixed a lot of stuff that was broken on there and got that stuff working. I think one of the final releases they did at DEF CON, they were handing out floppies to people at DEF CON and basically spreading it that way along with like the certain websites that they're on. So as you see here, the icons for the different components, edit server, Subseven. If you didn't know what the hell you were doing, a lot of people would click on the server. The server was pre-configured for a few different things. So if you downloaded a shady site, somebody might have it pre-configured for all their notifications, and then you would become their victim. Clicked on it. A lot of people wrecked a lot of computers that way because nobody was paying attention to how stuff worked, and they were just basically like, okay, I can hack with this. Let me just click on everything. Again, with the client, the edit server, all that stuff, the GUI basically is everything that you configured on there. And then you had all the different features. On the menus itself, you would have first connection menu, you'd have the IP scanner. Basically, you could scan network ranges for just one port open. So usually by default, the 27374 was the port that was open. You wouldn't want to do this a lot of ranges or huge ranges, because at the time, ISPs, there weren't a lot of people on there. There wasn't a lot of noise. There wasn't a lot of traffic. So a lot of times your ISP would kick you off, or you would get warnings to be kicked off if you were like just scanning outright. The second functionality is to get PC info. Basically, it just pulls up info on the computer. So if you had anything stored in either your emails or the computer system itself, if you named it, what your username was. The get home info was basically your address book for emails. And then you would have the server options. Basically, when you're connected to the server, you can change any of the settings on there. So you can basically change the port that it's working on. You can remove the backdoor itself. You can update the server itself. Basically, it would just upload to the newer, say like you had the 2.51, you would just upload that, it would execute that, and then you'd be working in the newest version. And then you would have the IP notify, which was basically kind of, I think it was probably one of the first of its kind, was IRC, actually command and control stuff over IRC, which, as you know, like Cobalt Strike and all these different C2s that are out now, they basically use that type of functionality where, you know, multiple people can jump on and attack stuff at the same time. It's just not one person. ICQ was an old messenger back in the day that you would just get notifications. They had an API that you can basically just a web get to, and basically it would just shoot you a message. You would just enter the UIN and whatever message you want to put on there. So it would basically say like victims online at this IP address, this port, etc. Then you would have email notifications, basically the same thing, just in the body of your email, you would have that information. Keyboard, basically key loggers, sending keys, retrieving those key logs itself, basically would work in the background. So even if you were disconnected, you could basically go and grab those logs themselves, look for any passwords, filter any passwords out, and you can wipe the logs, all that stuff. The chat, basically it popped up a small chat dialog box. You could talk to your victim like you were like customer service or something like that. So in the event that you were doing a social engineering, basically you would do that stuff, you would pop some stuff up and you would get them to do certain things that you needed them to do. So if you said like, hey, you need to log into this website and fix this, blah, 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 you can kind of control them that way. And then you had the matrix, which was basically if you were, you know, someone new at a computer, your whole screen turns black pretty much, and you can't do anything but watch this person pretty much type to you and you can answer to. So basically your whole screen would just fill up with this black screen, the matrix would pop up. Basically they couldn't do anything until you close that out pretty much, or they shut off their computer. Message manager pops up different message boxes. So like errors, stuff like that. You can change the icons to X's, exclamation points, etc., and change all the text on the title and body of the message box. Then you have the spies. You can spy on the different messengers, ICQ, AIM, MSN, and then ICQ takeover. Basically, you could take over that user session as them and basically create more victims. You could basically send them links, con them into clicking on stuff. And basically, you know, it goes by the friends list pretty much. They all know, you know, who you are, and they just trust you with that little bit more. You would get the FTP server, which was basically, it would open up an FTP server on the victim itself. You would be able to grab any type of files from that PC that you had access to. Again, Windows 98, 95, there wasn't much access control list, stuff like that for the user. So basically you had run of everything pretty much if you want to upload stuff into certain spots, startup folders to execute other stuff, and just basically read all their data. Again, with the RAS passwords, that was the cache passwords, dial-up passwords, all that stuff would be pulled from there and just displayed on the screen. A lot of times ICQ, AIM, those were in the registry. They were encrypted a certain way. You would just have to decrypt them. I think AIM at the time, I don't know if it was the original version or version down the line, was basically they used blowfish encryption. So they take your password, encrypt it, and then throw it in the registry. And basically what the program did was just decrypt it from the registry, the static key, and then basically show you in plain text. App redirect, basically you could execute any programs on the computer itself or execute anything as a program. Basically, it was just using the Windows shell execute functionality, and then it would just show you the output. So if you were to execute command.exe or command.com, I think it was at the time, you'd basically look like you would have a shell on that computer, and you basically could do whatever you want on there. And then port redirect is in, if they had other stuff that they had access to, you would be able to redirect that to that IP, that port and stuff like that, redirect that data. Didn't work too well, obviously, on LANs because there was no way for Subseven at the time to connect in. It was basically a direct connection. Somebody was on DSL and they're behind a LAN, there was no way for you to connect on there. You can get all the notifications because it's outbound, but coming in does nothing. Then you got the file manager, again, something for you to browse the drives, folders and everything, look for any type of juicy information that you may have. Window manager gives the ability to see all the open windows It would give you all the names of the windows that are open. So you've got Notepad open, you got Internet Explorer open, it would have all that and give you the ability to either hide it, disable it, show it. Process Manager, at the time, there was like a crap task manager in Windows 98. Didn't have a lot of functionality. It was basically the API just showed you like the exe name, no paths or anything. You didn't know what was really running on there. You just got a list of all the exes. So if you knew what to kill without breaking the computer, you could kill those processes. They had AV on there. A lot of times AV didn't really have protection that it used to have. So you're able to just kill anything at will pretty much. Text to speech would be another thing that would scare off people. Would be whatever you typed and sent to this person, it would be translated by True Voice, which was a plugin that you would upload that translated text to speech pretty much. It was kind of the original to that. So basically you would just type out like, I know what you did last summer or something like that. And it would just play through your speakers and scare the shit out of you. You got the clipboard manager, which would, anything that you copy pasted, it stays in that clipboard. You could just take all that data on there. A lot of times people copying passwords and maybe still in the clipboard. So a lot of good information on there. And again, going back to the IRC bot, the original type of C2, where again, you and your friends can join in the fun. It's not just you sitting at this. Your guys are, your friends on IRC or your, whoever you're talking with. Once that's connected in, you have control of that bot pretty much. You can send all the commands, just through text on IRC, reads all the data and kicks back whatever information or whatever it's doing. This is the file manager here. Basically, again, it just shows the drives. Shows you can upload, download, you can edit files, you can basically do whatever you can in front of the computer. You can even set the wallpaper. So if you wanted to put some weird picture on the background of their desktop, kind of like the ransomware does now, and it's like, shows stuff like that. It's pretty much based on all the crap that was around 25 years ago. It's just they have some newer features. They might have, better coding, stuff like that, where there's more ways to kind of hide stuff. You can execute shell code. There's all types of stuff that originally started from these Trojans and, kind of the basis of it. And it's like, kind of like, the great artists, don't paint stuff they steal. It's the same thing with like the industry pretty much. Even from the C2s, the antiviruses, they all have the same shitty features. They all have the same bells and whistles. It's just a matter of like how they're going to be, how they're going to be perceived and how they can make money off a lot of stuff. Fund Manager was basically all the stuff that you can do just to screw around with a victim. I mean, again, a lot of people, they were doing it for shits and giggles. It wasn't really like an evil thing for most people. A lot of it was just them screwing around. Like, how can I prank my friend? You can turn on the webcam and see what they're doing. If at the time, if they did have the old shitty 100 pixel webcams, you could pop that stuff up and kind of live stream it. It's almost a live stream. It's just multiple pictures were being taken at such a small range that even on dial-up it was pretty quick. So there wasn't not a lot of compression on the time. A lot of times they're using bitmap files, but because the stuff was so small, it went pretty quick. I think the desktop background stuff or viewing the desktop that did translate to JPEG just because it was such a huge file to do. I think it did do it on server side where it reduced the file before sending it. That way you had less bandwidth that you're using. Flip the screen, basically you flip it up and down, vertical and horizontal, and just screw with people. Printing stuff. Again, you can just print it, have a printer attached to the machine. You just print whatever the hell you want on there. The browser is basically, you can send people to a specific URL. A lot of times there was other stuff that was out back in the day. So if you needed to get some more access or stuff on the computer, or getting people to open up like click for pay type sites where every time like somebody went to that site, you would get like a penny or something like that. So a lot of times people use it for that, where they can get people to click on stuff. A lot of times there was browser exploits in old Firefox, Internet Explorer. Just by viewing the page half the time, you can get owned by a 0-day. You have access to the computer, but this would help with elevated access on some type of stuff, depending on machines. And then with the resolution, changing the monitor and the colors for the Windows taskbar, you could change the Windows button itself to whatever icon you wanted. You can change the colors to it. Screensaver, basically you can start a screensaver with any chosen text. So if you don't want them to see you moving the mouse around or have you see them doing anything on the screen, you can start that up, or you can just screw with somebody to basically lock them out and do whatever you want. Restarting Windows, you can just reboot it, all that stuff. And then you've got the sound. You can record sound if they had a microphone hooked up to the computer. A lot of times desktops, they either did or didn't, but at the time you can record stuff that was going on in there, pull that data down and see what's going on in that environment. date and time wasn't much. It's just like you can set the date and time just to do timestamps on stuff where, you know, it looks like, you know, this file was created 5 years ago and they're like, oh, it's always been here, whatever. And then the extra stuff was just, I guess the most famous one of this is the CD-ROM open and close, everybody's favorite cup holder. You know, you would own somebody and, you know, you would pop open their CD-ROM and scare the shit out of them. You know, someday for you know, dabbing somebody over TCP IP, if that RFC ever comes to fruition, kind of be the start of it. And then start, you know, hiding certain things from the user. Screwing with their caps. If they're typing, you're just fucking with them by, you know, turning caps on, scroll and all that stuff. So let's see. So this is the edit server. I'm going to have just a pop quiz. I want to see if anybody knows what this sound is. Doesn't play. Let me see if I can get it to play. Anybody know what that is? Who said it? Who said it over here? Okay, you said it. Where's Kevin? Here, give him a prize. So ICQ was, again, one of the notifications that you would get on there. If you had a lot of victims for Subseven and you dial up to online, when you get online, because of your bandwidth, because of your shitty computer with like 64 megs of RAM running Windows 98 SE, you would get something that sounded like this. And you would have like a million notifications that would just lock up your computer for like the first 5 minutes that you signed on. But it was a great notification because it was instantaneous. Anytime that they signed online or, you know, started up their computer, basically that notification would come straight to you and you could just get right in, get on their computer and just do whatever you wanted to do. So again, the edit server this is the pregame for your server or your backdoor. You've got the startup method. So basically reg run, all these different ones that like antivirus and all these people know about. Reg run service, the win any files. The Windows any files was the less known method, which was basically, the system any file, which would basically had a line in there that said explorer.exe. You put a space after it and just put your server name, like server.exe or mypix.exe. And that would basically execute anytime that person booted up their computer, that server was running. The not known method, which was one of the first of its kind that screwed a lot of people up because antiviruses, once they started picking up Subseven, it would delete that server.exe. So when you went to go boot up your computer, it's looking for that server.exe in the registry and it's not finding it. So anything that tries to open on the computer, like Notepad, Internet Explorer, Explorer itself, everything's broken on the computer. So, and effectively, it kind of bricked the computer from your AV. It wasn't so much the server's fault. It was just basically the AVs were really crappy at the time, where they were relying on static locations, strings, everything in the file, but they didn't think of the different methodologies that were used to clean up after the fact. So stuff like this did affect people. You got the email, the IRC, ICQ. You've got the password to protect your server. At one point, there was a server that was introduced. I'll get into that later, but basically the server was introduced with a master password. So MOBMAN, who created the program, actually put in a number in there that allowed him to get onto any of the Subseven servers of that version. There was another one in there. I think it was just a blank password, which was a bug in there that, like, if you got the password prompt to log into the server, you just hit enter. Don't type anything else, just hit enter, and it just kicks you right into being connected. And then you got your different installation methods. You can change the port if you want. You know, a lot of times firewalls or ISPs were looking for that port. So if they found that you were infected or something like that, they may block some stuff on there. So it was always good to change that or kind of blend in, you know, port 443, stuff like that. Then you have the different IRC bot names, all that stuff. And you can also change the icon of there. A lot of people, what they would do is just change or take the icon for a bitmap or a JPEG and use that as their icon. And again, just changing the file name to something like .com, it would always be like, you know, mypix.com, stuff like that. And you know, when they downloaded that, they just looked, they saw, oh, it's a familiar like JPEG icon on there. Let me just click this and get owned pretty much. This actually shows how far back, like, I've been playing around with this. Back in like 2002, that not known method, I created a VBS script that actually went through and cleaned all the stuff up, because I did have friends that I played tricks on that, like, if I fucked up their computer, you know, it enabled me to go in and fix any of the stuff that, like, say, like the AV erase something on there. Basically, I could use this to get all those reg run methods, those win any methods and the unknown methods off there and just revert it back to the way it was. And Subseven had gotten so popular that people were binding the server with another executable. They were binding it with like Winamp, and it was so popular that people were making Subseven Winamp skins to bind with it and send it out. So a lot of, you know, there was a lot of trickery going on. Again, it's going back to the social engineering. It's the same stuff as phishing emails, where you're just trying to get somebody to click on stuff or download it. A lot of wares sites, a lot of, you know, different IRC channels where people are just trading and saying, oh, you know, I've got the cracked copy of something, I've got this, I got that, you know, just trying to get everybody to click on it. So basically that's a broad overview of Subseven itself, all its features. This is a chat GPT of why Subseven was relevant, pretty much. They kind of like geared it toward espionage. It was used for this, it was used for that. Yes, it was, but a lot of it was like 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids playing pranks on their friends, playing pranks on their teachers, trying to change grades. It wasn't like anything super crazy, but it was used a lot in a lot of attacks back like 20 years ago, when this was the only C2 that you can have, and the only way that you can get on a computer and control stuff, or you know, by not breaking into stuff that's you know, a service or a web server that had some sort of flaw. So again, the comparison between now and then, you know, everybody's, you know, Cobalt Strike, Nighthawk, Havoc, Sliver, all those different C2s that are out now. The only difference on a lot of them, some are open source, some are not, some are paid corporate stuff. It's just basically, you just say, hey, this is my company now, I'm going to sell this to you, and you know, we're going to have some shady business agreements to say like, hey, I'm going to backdoor you with this. But there is some crack copies out there that are floating around. It's people that are not paying for it, not doing it legitimately, not getting, you know, the access. There are people that are taking the Java from Cobalt Strike. They're cracking the way that it looks a register key. So there's not so much, you know, of a comparison. It's almost like the same comparison to a gun. Like, you can give somebody a gun, they can use it to stop the bad guy, or they can be the bad guy. So that's the same thing with Trojans, backdoors, remote access, everything like that. It's just who's sitting behind it. So, you know, legitimately, you know, you can use Cobalt Strike, you can send that out, you can send phishing emails and gain access to there. But in the same turn, there's these bad actors that are out there currently that are doing the same exact thing, the same functionalities. A lot of times these red teams, they're learning heavily from the IR side of the house, where, you know, they're looking at where all these bad actors are doing stuff there, and they're copying and they're mimicking the same stuff. There was a time that, like, when I was at Mandiant, we had gear that was based off of, I think it was UNC something, 982 or something like that, where we actually got flagged as being like one of these bad actors from, I think it was like China or Korea or something like that, that we were on a network, and one of these EDRs basically picked us up and basically wrote a whole thing saying this is why it's Korea, but it was actually us. So, you know, using these same tactics, using all the stuff from the MITRE framework, basically getting all the different stuff from day to day, where you're using it for good. You know, these people are using it the same way for bad, and they're working hand in hand. Not so much, you know, working hand in hand, but the same functionality, the same features, the same methods of doing everything. So as Roman said, I was a cyber felon. Back in the day, this was, I'm going to say, about 2010-ish. I had gotten a visit by the FBI. I didn't know what the hell they wanted. They basically came and asked me a fuck ton of questions. One of them consisted of the Subseven Trojan. Now, being 2010 and Subseven wasn't around for years and years for the original version, they got it in their head that it's heavily redacted, but they got it in their head that one of their people that they picked up basically said that I was one of the coders responsible for Subseven. Now, again, this is 7 years later after the last version, and basically they came and paid me a visit and knocked on my door and said, hey, you know, we're looking at this. And at the time, I had gotten in trouble a couple of years prior for something unrelated. I was currently like, you know, on probation for that. So I wasn't in a good light anyhow, but because I was kind of under the thumb of the government at the time, they figured it'd be easier just to come pay me a visit. Now, all this stuff here, like this Foya that I got, this was probably took me about 3 years to get that back from the government on basically, you know, why the hell they showed up. I didn't know anything of why they were there, why they were asking questions, and basically none of their stuff made sense. Until this came out. They had asked me about botnets. They were heavily asking me about botnet stuff. At the time, Microsoft and the New Haven local office were working hand in hand to actually disable, they were hacking back pretty much computers that were infected with bots and the botnet stuff. So basically Microsoft went to the FBI, worked with the FBI and said, hey, we know all these bots are on these computers. We need to get them the hell off and we need to do something about it. So that kind of got me into my second mode of Subseven. Like first it was using it. Now it was like, okay, you know, what's the FBI looking at me for this? And all of a sudden there's a guy that appears in about 2 years later, comes in a Rolling Stone magazine and basically introduces himself as MOBMAN. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's the original MOBMAN. And basically said, you know, he's living in Florida now. He originally coded Subseven to steal passwords from Ultima Online, which, you know, typically a lot of people were doing. They were using that for their advantage to steal gold, all this other stuff from the online games and basically sell it and make more money and kind of get an edge on the game pretty much. So he went by the handle of Tampa Greg, which, you know, I started looking stuff up. I found him on Skype and ended up like sending him a message. I said, hey, you know, I used to be on your IRC, blah, blah, blah. You know, I use this XYZ. And he's like, oh, that's cool. He's like, I'm working on a new Subseven. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, send me a copy. Like, I'm not going to click the shit. But at the time he sent me this exe and I threw it into a VM and basically ran it. It popped up a very shitty GUI of a black square with the, you know, typical matrix green buttons on there. And he even messaged me and said, it even opens your CD-ROM, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm like, you know, you're writing in Visual Basic. I'm like, what happened to Delphi? Like, why aren't you, coding in the same thing? He's like, oh, you know, it's easier, this and that. I'm like, yeah, but then you have to send all the DLLs, the OCX files, unless you're really coding down and dirty with VB, you know, you have all these different dependencies for the file. Like you can't just send a straight exe. Sometimes it's looking for the WinSock OCX. There's all types of different reasons not to use that. And that's, you know, one of the reasons that the original MOBMAN had done it. So that was all fine and well. And then flash forward like 5 years, the Darknet Diaries, if you guys have heard them online, a lot of great stories. Jack Resider, you know, has a bunch of great backgrounds on people of, you know, how they got from where they are to where they're going. One of them happened to be MOBMAN. And I said, okay, let me listen to this. Started listening to it. I hit up all my friends that I used to talk to back in the day. I'm like, yo, check it out. He's on here, blah, blah, blah. He's finally talking. And we all came off with the same viewpoint at the end. Like, that's not fucking MOBMAN. Like, he doesn't know anything about it. Anytime that Jack had brought up Subseven, he had diverted the conversation and basically said like, oh yeah, you know, it just nonchalantly, yeah, it's just something I wrote. And then he would go on to a different subject. He would go on to Ultima Online. He would go on to, you know, saying that, you know, he hacked AT&T because his phone bill was too high. And so that's why he got arrested. And that's why he, you know, he wasn't coding the stuff anymore. You know, he gave a very generalized, like, hey, I'm a user type vibe to everybody. Like he had used it, yes, but he didn't give any details or insight into, you know, why he created it other than the Ultima Online or, you know, where he's gone, where he's been pretty much. He basically just had a very vague view of life, you know, up to that point pretty much from the past 15 years. So I actually met Jack at a DEF CON at a Telefreak party, talked to him about the whole podcast pretty much. And I said, you know, essentially this guy is not the real guy. I have some evidence that shows that he's not. I also have talks that I had with him where he's basically saying like, hey, this is where the master password comes into play. You know, this master password, you know, can you explain why you came up with this long digit here? And he's just like, you know, 2 + 2 is 4, carry over the 5. I was born on a Monday, so that's why I did this. And, you know, 144 was the start of my ICQ number. And then like 1980 was my year of birth, and then add a 15. So he came up with a really way of explaining it. I also started to grill him on kind of the people that were in the scene at the time. And he was just like, oh, you know, I'm so shot. I don't remember any of that stuff. So you know, he's pretty goofy. So I kind of cut it off. Like, you know, I knew he was kind of strange. So I was just like, okay, I'll just let it slide and go from there. Then he was on another podcast that's no longer, I think they shut it down like probably a year or two ago. It was called the Many Hats Club out of the UK. Basically, they had a 2-hour podcast with him. And it was basically the same thing. It was just him talking about Ultima Online for the reason for it. He would always offset the questions. Anytime Subseven came up, he would just basically brush it off and start talking about something else and go to a different subject. It was very, if you didn't know, you kind of figured it out, but a lot of stuff didn't add up. So I basically went into looking at when he said he was starting it. He was born actually at the same year as the real MOBMAN. So they kind of coincided with this stuff. I started looking into him. I saw a lot of like arrest records around that time, nothing for AT&T, but just stupid shit that he was getting into around the same time that Subseven was like kind of petering out. New stuff wasn't being created. And so it was kind of good, kind of bad. And also his ICQ number, nothing matched up. It was just the first 2 digits, not even the 3 digits. Started looking up the real MOBMAN. I started hitting up all the old people back in the day, just seeing like if they knew anything. I finally got a hit on somebody saying like, oh yeah, he's got this Twitter account with this name. Use that, and then when you do OSINT research, you go in to see like where the hell they're at, what usernames we're using on different sites, everything. So basically, I found him on Kick first, which I actually had his real picture. I didn't know if it was him, but I did edit it out because I don't want to kind of like blow up his spot. But basically, found him backtracking, finding where he was located, where he was from, where he used the other names. He actually had 2 different license plates that had something related to the stuff that he was doing that actually I found online. So I actually found his Jeep. When I contacted him, I sent him a whole bunch of these pictures and said, hey, your real name is the password for this zip file. Let me know if you can open it. Basically, we had a lot of back and forth talking about all the stuff that was going on in the day, how I found the Jeep, all this other stuff, and basically started moving over from emails, Discord, and kind of getting a lot of information about him, how he grew up in Romania. He was actually in Canada when Subseven was created. He was actually in Canada. He wasn't in Romania anymore. Greg had said that like he never left the United States. He doesn't even have a passport, so that doesn't coincide. And then there was all the different clues that he left in the different programs and the abouts of the different versions of Subseven, or the posts on his website where it says like, I moved to Montreal, or I was at XYZ in Windsor, Ontario, where he was going to school. So all this stuff, basically, it fell into place. So when I got to talk to him, he actually started sending me evidence that he was the real MOBMAN. One being the sweatshirt that he was selling on the site at the time, which anybody could have bought, really, but he still had the shit 20 years later. I don't know anybody that has like an old Subseven shirt. And then he found an old notebook that actually had his name and address from 1999, where he was actually going through and writing all the different form code, all the different stuff, all the checklists, all the different versions of Subseven that he was working on, adding the port scanners, all this stuff, adding all this stuff to the back of it. Everything that was in this notebook, he just scanned and sent to me. It's like who would have this if they weren't actually doing it? Yeah, there might be a one-off, but he even had the design of Subseven when he was coming up with this stuff. He did all the artwork. So that Subseven logo was actually something that he drew. And the original 7 for the original version was also something that he had come up with. He wanted to be an artist originally and then just got into coding from there. Then it's just basically talking about the forms, coming up with the different ports to connect to, other designs that he was kind of interested, all the different other features that he had on there, intermingled with stuff from like a mechanic that he was, had to call up, have that guy's phone number on there and stuff like that. All the commands that he wanted to add, all the features that people were requesting. So I'm going to buzz through these real quick because I got like a few minutes. There's a lot of fun facts about when you start to dig into it. A lot of times his versions were codenamed. One was MUIE. Basically, it stands for mostly used internet entertainment, which is actually slang for oral sex in Romania. If you just said it outright. The other one was Legends, Subseven Legends, which came out, which was actually a strip club that he used to go to in Ontario, which he had told me that's how he was coming up with the names, just random stuff. And this is the master password. This is actually his ICQ number, which you can see in every version of Subseven is hard coded into there. His license plate from Romania when he was back before he moved. And then his birthday itself. He was born the 15th of October in 1980. So that's how he came up with that string for that master password. It wasn't some random addition and math and all that other stuff. And the other thing was a backdoor that was put into Subseven, which was a batch file that would erase everything on your computer. If it found these certain ICQ numbers in the program, it would create this batch file that would go systematically recursively through your drive and erase everything. It was against a rival coder named Syphilis. That was that basically it was him originally that they found. All these other ones I actually found in the source code at one point, which I'll get into in a minute. So basically he added everybody from Syphilis's like IRC Trojan crew and added them in there. So actually all these numbers, not just the one that's listed on like Wikipedia and everything else, there's actually 11 different different ICQ numbers, 2 being the Syphilis's 2 numbers and then his crew. Then basically it just talks about on there where, you know, people found out that the hard drive killer was on there. The guy who had coded hard drive killer originally had posted about it being in Subseven. So he was just basically answering on the site, just basically talking about the website of how everything was and the ICQ numbers. I screwed up the images here in the orders. But basically, like he went through Syphilis's program here on the GIF and basically got everybody's ICQ number and all their information from there, and then basically added that to the code. You know, he would just give a fuck you. It's basically back in the day, a lot of Trojan coders and all this other stuff. They would have these online IRC fights, like who was the better coder and this and that. The culmination of this thing is like he also sent me a couple different versions of Subseven. I'm releasing those on GitLab, the first version being 2.1.3, which was the version right before the hard drive killer. It was basically 2.1.4, which was the bonus version. That one got released just to screw with that Syphilis guy. So this is up on my GitLab. If you want to scan the first QR code to the left, that's actually the Delphi code. It's not super complete. When he sent it to me, there was a lot of missing components. I worked with somebody and basically got all those compiled to basically get it into working code. So the GIF file here is also on that. So if you want to look at it at your own leisure, it basically shows me compiling the source and getting Subseven open. You'll see in the bottom folders the server and the client being created, opening it up, connecting to the server, and showing that you can actually, you know, connect and get on there. The second one is something I wrote the other night with the help of ChatGPT, was a Python script that basically took the binary, decompressed UPX on it. From that compressed exe, I would go in the resource files and I would find the encrypted hard drive killer in a resource of the executable. Once it was extracted from there, he used, I think it was a 6-digit password or XOR key to de-XOR the file pretty much and make it to the plain text file. So if you actually go and get the 2.1.3 binary, run my Python script in the same directory, it would actually extract that and extract the hard drive killer using the key. Actually, it was actually 7 digits, but the last digit, the way he coded it was fucked up. So that last digit, if you notice in the bottom corner is a 9, I can put like an X there and it'll still decode it. And then just wrapping up the whole thing, bringing back my Nemo thing. It's just, this is the whole culmination of like my career of you know, back in, you know, 99 when this came out, was basically when I was getting my first computer, basically getting into learning about it, getting friends online where I teach stuff and I would learn stuff and basically all the setbacks, like getting arrested and then coming back and cleaning up my record and, you know, getting jobs at these different various companies. And then just the journey, you know, the whole InfoSec life pretty much up until this point is basically what moral of the story for Nemo is, according to ChatGPT. So I just wanted to wrap up with this. Thank everybody from MOBMAN, Rita 101, Darkcoder SC, and the old Subseven IRC crew that kind of helped me to get up to this point, and should be good to go. Thank you, everybody.